This is Chris Thiede, Managing Editor of Comarch Magazine, and I'm pleased to be here today with Barbara Riekse from Nelson Worldwide. And Barbara, I guess to start off, if you could just kind of tell me a little bit about your role there at Nelson.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. So my role at Nelson is the Workplace Practice Leader. And as Workplace Practice Leader, I'm involved in the data collection, the strategies and insights, the actual execution of workplace projects for our commercial tenants. And we're designing great spaces all around the human experience.
Great. So thank you for that introduction. So the reason that we wanted to talk with you here today is I understand that Nelson has conducted a survey with regards to re-entering the workplace. And you know, we're dealing right now for anybody who might be watching or listening to this sometime in the future. It's late 2020 and we're still dealing with the effects of the COVID pandemic, and companies are trying to figure out how to navigate this new space in terms of allowing or welcoming employees back to the office, and do employees want to come back and that kind of a thing. So I understand that you conducted some research around that.
We did. It's been a roller coaster of a ride. I think most of us thought it was only going to be a couple weeks and we'd be back into our workplaces. So we conducted this survey from early to mid-June, which had people being home for a while, which was great because we wanted to understand how they were feeling about being at home and how they were feeling about returning to the workplace. So we fielded the survey with about 2,000 respondents who were already working from home and had previously worked in an office environment. Sorry, you might want to edit.
No, that's fine. Keep going.
All right. So the survey was focused on people who were organizations who had 200 plus or more employees. And we asked them a combination of not only quantitative information, but qualitative information. And those are the type of responses that we got back. And we feel culturally that's the best way to conduct a survey, is a combination of those two types of questions.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess, your overall goals in terms of what you were hoping to learn and what your methodology. I mean, you mentioned a little bit the methodology in terms of qualitative and quantitative questions, but I guess anything more that you can tell me about the methodology and what you're wanting to learn.
Yeah, definitely. We're a company that's really focused on boldly transforming the human experience. And that's how we design. We design around the user and around the people who are occupying the space. So we view the challenges and opportunities in regard to that through a deeply human and personal lens. For us, it was about going beyond the physical shifts. So we all know what the physical shifts were. Right? So you go in and you would, sanitize your hands, or you would wash your hands. We know that workstations were going to be more physically distanced in returning to the work. But we wanted to clarify how we as individuals have responded to the sudden change in our work styles and work environments beyond just the physical. So from our own experiences, we had a few hypotheses, but we mostly wanted to understand how people were feeling in regard to a number of topics. So those topics were, has remote work impacted the perception of productivity? Obviously, very important to try to measure that in the workplace. Difficult, but we want to measure it in terms of our physical space. And what helped people feel more or less productive in the new normal? So how did your home office help you feel more productive, or did a combination of going back to the office and being at home help your new normal? What role does the office play from both a cultural and physical perspective? And one of the more important things was retaining and reassuring your staff in terms of their home environments or a combination of environments. And then we wanted to look at any generational differences in the responses. How do different generations respond to going back to the workplace?
Okay, so was your goal with the research then to help the companies like the ones you surveyed, I guess, better understand what they need to be doing and how they need to be uh, serving their employees or making sure their employees not only feel safe but are safe?
Well, I think we wanted to help them along a continuum.
Okay.
The changes have happened so quickly, and many of them are a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on. So we wanted to help people be more thoughtful in their response to returning to work.
Okay.
You know, there's this tension between the desire to return to the office and then what the return means from a health and safety perspective. So, for instance, staff who may otherwise feel productive in remote environments have noted some pandemic specific environments to their productivity. So when you can't get out, you really want to get out.
Right.
And that's not the typical situation when you're working remotely. And then our office environment is important, but it will now play a different role in the work-life balance equation than it has historically. We're going to see managers start to loosen up. We're not going to see sick people come into the office,
Right.
That's for sure. So how that office environment culturally fits into our new normal is really important. And then we noticed that we had a return to the basic needs of Maslow's hierarchy. People have a need for safety and security. It's right at the top of that pyramid. It's in the forefront of their minds, and they're craving reassurance and confidence from their companies in terms of that. So that's a communication and a brand initiative that companies need to start thinking about.
Okay.
And also personal autonomy, so choice within the workspace and flexibility will be non-negotiable for teams moving forward, both in how they choose to work, so the choice, and where they choose to work, the balance between working from home and an office environment.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, as I understand it, there are three, your findings kind of fell into three main, I guess, categories, right? Or three
Yep.
main buckets. First of all, I want to take a little bit of a deep dive on each of those and have you talk a little bit about, what you found in a little bit of detail and what you think they mean. So starting off with, as I understand, employees longing for purposeful and visible changes. Talk a little bit about what that means.
So purposeful and visible changes would be seeing more distance between employees. Over the last, since the Great Recession of 2008, users of real estate have really condensed their spaces. They wanted more of a return on their investment in terms of real estate. So we've gone down to a smaller square footage in our offices. We also, in terms of that, have gotten, more clutter in the open office space. So people want to see clean. They want to be able to see across a field of open office to feel that safety in terms of returning to the office. And it's a mixed bag. Some people feel more productive, as I mentioned earlier, and some feel less productive. So helping people along that continuum with the tools to do that is going to be important as well.
Okay. So, and then the second thing was the tension between wanting to return to work. I'm sure, as you mentioned before, people, have been stuck in their homes for a while and stuck with their kids and whatnot, and they just want to have interactions with other adults, probably.
Probably.
So there's a little bit of that tension, but then there's also that anxiety that goes with it. Talk a little bit about your findings there.
Well, we found that every human being is different. Right. And some of those findings were surprising, right? Some people you would expect would want to come into the office because they're more social, maybe are afraid of coming back into the office. So 61% of the respondents would prefer to return to the office at least one day a week and have that flexibility. And then only 7% of the respondents, 7% wanted to return 5 days a week. So we've really gotten over that hump of people working remotely and feeling comfortable doing that. If you think about the advances that we've made in technology with web-based video conferencing, we can do that easily now. Mm-hmm. And people have learned to go between environments much easier than they did before. So 7% of respondents only want to come back 5 days a week.
Okay. And then the last thing was craving clear communication. This one seems pretty obvious when you think about it, given the often conflicting information that we get all the time. I guess talk a little bit about what you find or what you found about employees wanting, something a little bit more clear and I guess easy to understand or just having that clarity from their employers.
85% of people said it was extremely important that they operate with their company with a high degree of trust.
Okay.
And that is communication. So we found that many organizations have their CEOs and their leadership really communicating with their employees now that we have been working from home on a much more frequent basis. And that communication will need to continue in order to feel safe going back to the office, in order to feel secure with the organization. So we've been building cultures within office spaces for some time now. We've come a long way from cubicle land, and we want to continue that journey with our customers and really create environments that their employees feel safe in, as well as culturally vibrant.
Okay. So those were the three main buckets in terms of your findings. Were there any others that you wanted to bring up, or was that pretty much?
Well, those were the three main buckets. But I think one of the most important things that we saw was that empathy is going to be critically important as we go back to the office place, the workplace. Okay. So being empathetic to all those different types of personalities that occupy and make up our great cultures is going to feel important. And we really felt that that was the emotion that the organization needed to focus on. That, in addition to brand. People wanted to make sure that their brand is something meaningful and meaningful to their employees so that they stay longer and that they feel safe.
So that empathy, that's interesting to me because I think it goes back to what you said before in terms of everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people having different viewpoints or different attitudes about things. So being empathetic to everyone in terms of whether they, are hesitant to come back in or whether they are raring to go back, 5 days a week or whatever, or somewhere in between, having that empathy for your employees, right?
Yeah, and for your, not only the organization having empathy, but individuals having empathy for their coworkers.
Sure. Okay.
Is important, and communicating that is important is a good thing for everybody's mental health. And we all know mental health is attached to physical health as well. Mm-hmm. So if we want to feel good about going back to our workplaces, we need to have healthy minds and bodies.
Well, and mental health, I mean, that's getting a lot of attention these days because we're all kind of dealing with this, strange new world, and it's not necessarily all positive in terms of, being isolated and that kind of a thing. So paying attention to employees' mental health, I would imagine, is very important.
Yeah, it's important from a design perspective, and we think about it as we design. I mentioned earlier, we think about the human being and the user and designing all around that. That includes designing around their comfort. That includes designing around their security and around their intellect. All of those things we're designing around is all about the human experience, and that human experience is going to change as we go back to work.
Sure. All right, so I guess, given all this information that you've learned, I guess what would your advice be or your suggestions be to companies who are digesting this information and how they should proceed or how they should kind of use this information?
Right, so you take the survey and use it as a guide to reentry, recognizing that you have lots of variables in different offices. It's just like you have different personalities and different types of functions, you have different types of variables in terms of your brand, whether you have a strong brand, whether you have an unrecognizable brand, how you relate that brand to your employees and customers. What region of the US you're in is important. Whether you're in a major urban area or in a tertiary city where you have lower rise spaces that could play into this. The demographics within your organization is important. You might have younger demographics in terms of a tech company versus a financial company, so you want to keep that in mind. And what industry you're in, or even within your industry, what kind of business occurs in the office that you're talking about. So a lot of our larger customers, for instance, would have a call center. That's much different than a sales office. You know, and how you really think about those different types of offices is important in terms of return to work.
Okay. So what about other design firms? I mean, how should they be thinking about the work that they do for their clients? I'll give you a minute to get your.
Yeah, I guess these really don't fit. Well, it's important for architectural design firms to come together as an industry. I think we have a responsibility to the businesses that we serve, and collectively responding to that. It's, you know, this is a problem no one saw coming, really, right. And it's a problem we couldn't avoid. So we're all in this together, and we have a responsibility to our cities, which are hurting so much for different reasons, both social reasons and economic reasons. So that responsibility means that we as designers and as architects have that continuing responsibility to be active and be together in terms of going back to work.
Okay. So, and what about Nelson themselves? I mean, how has this changed or affected the way that you approach your client work yet? I mean, it's only been a couple months since you've completed it, but you know, how has that changed? How are you moving forward?
Right. I think initially everybody was kind of in shock, and then our customers started asking us, how are we going to respond to this? What are we going to do? And they know us as a firm that's rooted in strategies and insights. So they wanted us to respond in kind. How are we going to help them? And how, from our perspective, would we be in the forefront of really producing that data and those type of insights? So we created an organization within Nelson, a project management organization that we called Spark. And Spark was all about planning in terms of return to work. And this Spark project management organization allowed us to bring our best practices together throughout Nelson and respond with a One Nelson voice to our clients, to recognize those challenges that we were going to be collectively facing and learn from the challenges and the opportunities that we were going to have in a very organized fashion.
Okay. Talk a little bit about, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems perhaps unusual for an architecture firm to kind of undertake a project like this, but as I say that out loud, probably not, right? Because you're responsible for developing spaces, creating spaces for people. So I would imagine you felt it's important for you to understand the people that are going to be using those spaces. So I guess talk a little bit about why it was important for you to take on this project.
Well, we knew there was going to be temporary shifts in behavior, but we also recognized there were going to be long-term behavioral shifts. And so our customers were going to be looking at how their consumers respond to their treatment of employees, how users within the space were going to be treated by their organizations, and how we as humans were going to return to our workplaces following COVID. So looking at that long-term perspective and understanding the long-term perspective is really important to design firms, because we create really productive environments for employees, and collaboration, human interaction, all of those things is important to a more productive society.
Okay. So the last question I have is, I guess, I mean, what have you, aside from, you know, the information that you learned itself, I guess, what was your takeaway, or what, you know, how did you, what did you take away from this process, I guess, or this project?
I think what we took away from the project and the process was that we needed to be super flexible. And we needed to design spaces as well that were going to be flexible, because people don't lease space or occupy space for just 1 year. They lease space for long term.
Mhm.
And it's holding their human capital, and it's the most important thing to an organization. So we learned that, as I mentioned earlier, that empathy was going to be incredibly important, and understanding the vision of the organization in terms of what their business drivers were was important as well.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you very much. I guess before we sign off, is there anything else that you feel is important that you wanted to cover that maybe I wasn't smart enough to ask?
No, I think that you covered a lot of what the survey was about, and you can find more about the survey on our website.
And say the name of it, say that website again.
NelsonWW.com.
Great. And we'll have a link to that in the story and in the descriptions and so forth, so people can find that.
Cool. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you very much.